So we take a material focus. We have introduced our Concrete Designs to Thrive program in this last year. The year before, although we were on lockdown, we introduced our Salvage Scotland, looking at sustainable design in coastal communities. And we're preparing for COP26 in Glasgow, sustainability being at the heart of much of what we do. Journeys in Design is linking design and well-being through these different material focuses. And our linen stories kicked all these off in 2018. We found focus for our linen stories this year in a festival. The idea of a festival is a notion of a ritual revisiting. So I very much hope this festival is the first of a triennial set of festivals in Fife in Scotland. We've chosen Fife, particularly because the community has been so welcoming, but also it might well arguably be the chief linen county in Scotland in terms of heritage. I'm going to plump for Kirkcaldy as the chief linen town. There will be debate. This is our logo for the festivals. The global logo is with the world in the center of a flax plant. Very pleased with our color choice there. That's the flax that you see behind me growing. So let me stop sharing screen. And today is about an introduction to the significance of flax as it can be. It is, of course, a venerable fiber, but it's a living fiber. And it's never been more relevant to try and link that into what we're doing here in Scotland. So it's a great honor to be welcoming some wonderful speakers. It is a 10-minute presentation for each. Our first star is called Grow Flax Now, and we're going to be looking at how flax grows. Our second hour is about the wider cultures, ecotourism, education, and transnational community deriving from flax. So I don't want to say too much more other than welcome everyone. We have expert presenting, but a lot of experts in the audience, and it's great to see everyone. And we're going to kick off our first presentation from Sirpa Morsky, who's based in Finland. I met Sirpa at first in 2018 at the Linen Biennale in Northern Ireland, a wonderful initiative, which very much hope will continue. And that was organised amongst others by Jane McCann. Today, what we're going to do is ask our experts to give us our 10-minute presentation. And then I've chosen to have a little think, ask a particular person in the audience to give a response and perhaps a provocation to the presentation. Those will run, and then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A before a 5-minute stretch your leg break and our second hour. So it's a pleasure to introduce Sirpa. Sirpa, would you like to take the floor?
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank John to asking me to join this roundtable. As he said, we have met several times in Northern Ireland. But to put it quick, so I start because I have only 10 minutes. Share the screen. How can I find here? Okay, when I studied at the Vetterhof Institute of Craft and Design and Teacher Education in Finland, in IkvmLIN, that was about 40 years ago. So I was interested in gaining knowledge about flax cultivation from seeds to yarn while using traditional methods and tools. I managed to get a piece of land to have my own flax field. I was so lucky. And as flax cultivation had a long history in southern Finland, it's quite easy. It was quite easy, and it's still quite easy to find traditional hand tools for all those necessary phases within the flax treatment process. And by the way, I have added also a Finnish word for each phase of treatment in brackets that you can learn Finnish as well. So kylväminen, planting first, and traditionally planting needs to be done when the bird cherry tree blossoms in Finland, which is, let's say, late May, early June, in windy weather, seeding against the wind, and while felting, using felted boots. I didn't do that, but that's like a myth. 2 years ago, I tried 2 different seeds, flax seeds. One is original Marta on the left-hand side, and they tried to keep that Marta seeds alive, and I managed to get some seeds. And the other part of the field, I use just seed, which I don't know the origin, but I tried 2 different type of seeds. Harvesting, the growing season lasts about 90 to 100 days in Finland, and it's usually late August when we harvest the flax. And pulling is done by hand towards the body, taking 1 handful of stems at a time. And you can see I have some helpers. I have my husband, Matti, who is always involved in my project. Oh, sorry. And then after pulling, we put those stems of flax stooked into bundles with 2 stooks tied together to keep them upright. But you can also use, like hang them over a rope or a fence. It depends where are you, and it's possible to have them upright, but it's good to do that way. And then next phase is rippling, rohkiminen. The flax seeds are removed by pulling handfuls of plants through a simple comb. And here you can see on the right-hand side, old type of tool for rippling, and that's fixed. That wooden piece with those nails or pins. They are fixed, or this is fixed on the bench, and 2 people in turns doing that. But I couldn't find that tool this time, so I used, or Matti, my husband, did this piece of wood with nails, and he did the whole process. I just collected then those seeds. And after rippling, there's retting, and you can do that at least 3 different ways. I have tried all these 3 ways. I put 1/3 in the lake, and it took, let's say, 2-3 weeks. And second part of my harvest or crop, I left on the field, and it takes a little bit longer time. And the third part I left under the snow, and because at that time it was so, let's say, a lot of snow, I couldn't dig them out in certain time, so they stayed there the whole winter, which gave which gave very nice color, very white color for the linen or flax. And then, but it also make them very weak. But you can of course use that way that you lay those flax over the top on the snow and then cover a little bit using snow as well. And then you can manage to let's say see how long does it take to ret them. And after retting, it's drying. You can dry them hanging over a rope or hay rack or fence. But final drying in sauna, normally in Finland. Flax bundles are smashed very strongly using a flax brake and shaken well to separate the chives. And you can use this old-fashioned type or old type of flax brake, which is quite many places you can find them. So on the right-hand side you can see there's a young man to do it. So he was assisting me last year. I did this breaking last summer in I think you can call the place, it's like a heritage farm where they have all these hand tools to try. And then I have tried also this rolling flax brake, and it's so easy because it was run by a tractor. And also because it was like a very let's say almost do the scotching as well, which is the next phase. And the scotching tool is like a flax brake, but it's lighter, and it has this metal tongue in the bottom of the deck. And then hackling, which is the next phase, and it's done by in order to separate the shorter tow fibers from the long fine fibers. And there are two small areas of spikes. The first one is which is like quite far away, far apart, and then finally you can throw your flax through the finer comb. And so all these are for spinning, the fibers prepared for spinning. And here you can see tow fibers, which is rohdin in Finnish, on the top, and the hackled fibers, aivina, which is thin, fine fibers. And you can see those color difference. Marta gave us quite dark color. And here is also some prepared for spinning. So we have this distaff rock, which is tort in Finnish, and then you use that when you have those long fine fibers, and fork distaff for tow fibers. And spinning wheel, which I normally use, but I have tried also this hand or drop spindle, which is Vertina. Not so easy. Jane knows that. And then some result I have here. So fibers, and then some yarn, which I have spun. Last but not least, weaving some of my woven pieces, panel curtain, some towels, table runners for sauna bench, tablecloths,
That's two.
and all. Sorry.
2 minutes, thanks.
Okay. The last words. All my own works are for everyday life, not for cupboards. And as we say in Finland, linen gets better when used. Thank you.
Sirpa, thank you very much indeed. I rudely interrupted there and perhaps cut you off in full flow. What a wonderful account of your work. And, you know, very early on, 1979, I think you said, it was wonderful to hear the different names. We're not drying our flax in a sauna, but I like the idea. I'd like to now introduce Jane McCann. I'm doing that by quickly sharing a slide. Jane is really, I can get this to Jane, and her commitment to material innovation is really remarkable. And we last met in Knockadee. This is the shores. I'm not about to go surfing. This is a flax surfboard that Jane has purchased for her daughter, who will be surfing with it. I'm going to ask Jane to come in just now. Jane, would you like to respond to Sirpa and perhaps pose any relevant questions you may have? You're just unmuted. You're just still muted, Jane. Great.
Thank you for asking me to ask some expert questions. I don't know how expert, but I'm interested. I obviously know a lot about what Sirpa's done and the length of time that all these processes take. And my questions are to do with how we communicate the true value and cost of flax/linen to wider audiences, especially these days when you know, textiles are quite often made out of sight and out of mind. So my first question, can you briefly tell us what parts of the process could be scaled up or can be scaled up in Finland? You know, you've talked about cultivation, fibre processing, spinning, weaving, product development. Could you just say, is this widespread or are people aware of it in Finland?
About cultivation, I think it's not realistic, because if you think about the industrial or bigger scale, so I think Low Countries and Baltics or eastern part of Europe, linen is coming from that area, and fiber processing as well. I think it's not realistic bigger scale in Finland, but I think weaving is the most or the biggest area where we can do more. But,
I know that when we went to one of the companies, there seemed to be boxes of spun fibre from Italy. Is that?
Yeah, Jokipin Pellava is using European linen yarn, and also Lapuan Kankurit. But there's a bigger company called Finlation, but they are using yarn coming from Kingdom, from China. But European is.
Well, my other question is.
Better be quick, Jane.
Sorry?
Better be quick.
Yeah, how can we bring future practitioners into this trade? You know, just quick question.
I think that teaching is one part, definitely, that schools, we have different levels. Schools like handicraft schools, we have adult education, these courses during the summer, and also even Aalto University, they have textile studies, and also we can think about those training places in Lapuan Kankurit or these small companies, and I think that's one part how to get involve these young people. And also, of course, craft fairs, they are so popular here in Finland.
Jane, and particularly Sirpa, thank you so much, Jane, for your question, and Sirpa for your presentation. Interesting enough, the revaluing of textiles will come into our later discussion, and as well education. I think it's a lovely link to think about scaling up as we move to ask Helen Keys from Northern Ireland to County Tyrone to give us some presentation about farming. Helen.
Got myself unmuted. Thank you very much, John, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm really pleased to be here with such a group of interested people who have obviously fallen down the same rabbit hole that I have fallen down in the last 4 years. When I'm talking to you today, it's from a farmer perspective. We are farmers who got into textiles rather than textile folk who got into farming. So we're maybe coming from, maybe we know a lot less than you guys, which might be why we very naively went down this road without really understanding the full implications of what we were getting into. So just to give you a bit of background, we have a 50-acre farm in County Tyrone. So we're right in the middle of Northern Ireland. It's a lovely part of the world. We inherited the farm about 12 or 13 years ago from my husband's father. And to be honest, we weren't expecting to. It was a little bit of a surprise to us. And we, over the last, for a long time, we didn't know what we were doing, didn't know what to do with it. When we inherited the farm, it had a suckler herd of cows, and that was where the money came from. So we grew grass on the farm to feed to the cows, and that was pretty much all we knew how to grow. And that's quite a similar story in many other places. Prior to that, when Charlie's dad had the farm, it had been dairy. Not very intensive dairy, but dairy. And prior to that, the generation before his father would have had a mixed farm. So they would have had some pigs and 1 or 2 cows, and they would have grown crops. And one of the crops that they did grow on the farm was flax, amongst many others. It was very much a mixed farm. And that again would be sort of fairly typical. What got us down the line of trying it again on the farm was my husband's also a sculptor. He makes these bronze sculptures, and we were looking for some Irish linen to package the sculptures, and in sort of trying to find Irish linen that had been grown here, discovered that actually it's been quite a long time since anybody grew flax anywhere in Ireland for it to be processed into linen. And in a little fit of madness, Charlie said, well, sure, we're looking for something to do with the farm. We knew that, keeping the farm as a suckler herd was not, it wasn't really a bright future. And to be honest, we were really struggling with a farm that we couldn't really see a future for. So that was a real challenge. So when we saw something that, here's something we could try, we decided to give it a go. And we went then on a mission, and we spoke to people like, the McCann, Felix and Eugene, and we spoke to Herman and Marion up in Dungiven, and we did the rounds of everybody who we could find who knew anything about flax and flax growing, including, Charlie's older uncles and so on who knew a bit about it, and got all the advice we could, ploughed a field, sowed it with a fiddle, and that was the start of it. I've got a little time lapse here. Sorry, it's a bit shaky, but it will show you the first year's crop growing. And as you know, it grows in sort of something like 100 days. Now, the first year we did it, it was rubbish. I don't mind telling you. We grew the wrong variety. We planted at the wrong seed rate. It was absolutely full of red shank, which anybody who's grown flax will probably know a bit about. Red shank being one of the real enemies of flax. It is in our part of the woods anyway. It took us a full month to harvest it because we really didn't know how to do that. And even though we had a load of helpers, we kind of didn't get properly organized. So it was all a bit of a disaster that first year. This is this year's crop, which is just a different story. It's you know, this is year 4, and every year we learn more and we talk to people. We actually have learned loads from reading old books, you know, books from the sort of, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s, because actually it was at its peak agriculturally then, so we can still learn loads from how they did it then. So we have a beautiful weed-free crop this year, which we harvested. This is 3 acres compared to our first year, which was 1 acre, but we harvested it quicker this year, just because we've got a bit better. We've learned all the wee tricks and techniques now that we didn't have before. So nice crop. One of the things that I find really interesting is that, you know, we look at how they did it, going back, and you know, our Charlie's uncle will tell us how they did it, but actually there's lots of wee things we can do now that they couldn't do then. Like, you know, we've barbed wire fences all over the farm, which are perfect for hanging flax on. So that's a really good way to get it dried. Although we discovered you don't hang it all on one side of the fence like we did here, because then your fence falls down. And you have to hang it either side to get it nicely balanced. We have tried retting in the field, and it didn't have great success with that. It's really labor intensive. You know, I admire people looking at it, because you're going out and turning it, and you're so dependent on the weather, and we haven't great climate for it where we are. So what we're doing now is retting it in a great big old repurposed stainless steel tank that we got from it was originally in a cheese factory, then it went to a fish hatchery, and now it's enjoying its third life as a flax tank, retting tank. We use rainwater off the lane. You can see there's a pipe going in there. So we're collecting rainwater, filling up the tank with the rainwater, and that's working beautifully. And we just spread it out in the field below there to dry. That was a really important part for us to get right, because the retting in rivers and streams was one of the real problems with the industry in Ireland. And you can trace the decline in rivers is directly related to the increase in the linen industry in Ireland, because they would ret it in a flax dam. Every farm in Ireland had a flax dam on it. They'd put the flax in, they'd ret it in the dam, and then they'd let the water from the retting away into the river. And that would cause a really, you know, it's really damaging for the rivers. So it's really important that we get this bit right. But again, the nice thing on farms nowadays is most of us have a slurry tanker. Most of us have the equipment where, you know, we'll have some kind of tank, and we can go in and draw it out with a slurry tanker and use it as fertilizer on the field. So we can spread it on fields, and then it's not getting near the river, and we can actually make use of all that nutrient that's been absorbed in the retting water.
That's 2 minutes, Helen. Thank you.
That's okay. I'm just finishing. That's grand, John. So I just want to say, from a farmer's perspective, how important it is for us to be looking at crops like flax. Particularly in Northern Ireland, we have an agricultural system which is primarily grass-based. 80% of our farming is, you know, meat, dairy and poultry, so our main crop is grass. And so we have this big sort of monoculture, and that's just really, you know, it's not good for in all kinds of ways, and it's particularly not good for biodiversity. And we really urgently need to be diversifying our farming into other crops. And to me, fibre is a really, really clever way to go and a good way to go. And, you know, we have a 7-year crop rotation. So we're moving away from being only grass and bringing in cereals along with the flax. And that's, you know, great. We're already seeing the results of that on the farm. We're seeing lots more insects, pollinators. We're seeing flocks of linnets turning up, which we never had seen before, or maybe we just didn't notice them, but flocks and flocks of linnets arriving because of the flax. And I think I mean, I know we have a whole supply chain to fill in, and we're working hard on doing that so we can have commercial scale. So, you know, and I think by next year we should have that up and running so that we can machine process the flax into linen. But just from a sustainability point of view, all of the other things that we can do with that fibre, and we're working with Jane, who has just been brilliant at inspiring us to look at all the other ways, regardless of the textile, all the other potential areas that we have. So, we can turn our oil into polish, and we can be looking at furniture, and, people are already making car parts out of flax. So we have a world of other things that we can look at. So I think from an agricultural point of view, flax is definitely a future crop.
Helen, thank you. I'm going to stop you there. I think we could all free flow on this. It's such an exciting thing. Really wonderful to hear about the biodiversity and sustainability that you're committing to as a farm person. I'm going to ask Arwen Roberts from Wales to come in. I should say that I met Helen on the farm about 2 months ago, and I know that there's a fantastic flax community throughout the UK, and that Arwen has been in touch with you. Arwen, would you like to come in with a reflection at all?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thank you. Hi, Helen. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. Great presentation, and it was just really nice to see some pictures. So yeah, I kind of called in on Helen's advice with my growing this year. So it was amazing to be able to talk to Helen on the phone and now being able to see in pictures what you've been doing. So that's great. So yeah, you were really helpful to me this year, and I needed to broadcast my flaxseed at really short notice because of lots of kind of external factors. So that was, and after seeing you broadcasting on Facebook a photograph, which is kind of why I touched base. So I just wondered what might be your biggest concerns going forward, but also what excites you? So I know you've just touched on, where flax can go, but for you personally at your farm, yeah, what are the biggest concerns, or what excites you?
Well, the biggest challenge obviously is getting the rest of the processing chain up and running. The retting is, we can do that in the tanks, and we could put a lot of flax through that scale of tank. The scotching, we're restoring an old Mackie scotching turbine, so we're just working on getting power to that, and that will scotch a lot of fibre. A lot quicker than we can do it by hand, which is what we're doing at the minute. But so that bit, the next stage will be that we're lucky to still have weavers and beetlers, but the spinning is a gap. But again, we are working on that and hoping to get that filled in the next few months, hopefully. So fingers crossed. So that's the biggest challenge. The biggest hope, I think, is just, all of the stuff that we've been working with Jane on, all of the other things that you can do with every bit of the flax plant, and, looking at, can we, be making wall panels and room dividers and furniture, and, there's such a huge interest in that as well. It's not like there isn't a market for it. We have a list of people who are, interested in not just buying textile, but, working with us on developing all of those other things as well. And don't get me started on nettles.
Oh, well, I want to another time. It's fascinating what you're achieving with that, with nettles on your boundary of the farm. Listen, thank you very much. Wonderful. Thanks, Arwen, Grow Flax in Wales, and Helen, thank you so much for that presentation. Really interesting to see that little bit of scaling up and the complexities of farming. There's so much I'd want to respond. We do have some questions coming through. We'll pitch those. We're not having a breakout. We're extending into our 50 minutes Q&A a little bit. But without further ado, I'd like to ask our colleagues from Portland, Oregon, Angela and Shannon, if you would like to come in with your presentation about a bioregional network for us. Over to you.
I think Shannon's just unmuting.
Sorry, I hit the play before I unmuted.
Lovely to see you both. Thank you very much for coming.
Technical. Hello, I am Shannon Welsh. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I am co-founder of Fibrevolution and also have been the affiliate coordinator for Pacific Northwest Fibershed, which is a Fibershed affiliate here in the western part of the US. I entered into this with a passion for textiles. I have a background in design, and my family heritage is in the Midwest in farming. And so I always kind of find it interesting that I do think sometimes the magic of flax is in your blood and it grabs you. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
And I'm Angela Wartes-Kahl, and I'm Shannon's business partner for Fibrevolution. And I'm coming at it from an agricultural background as an organic farmer for the last 17 years now. I'm trying to remember how long it's been. And we've been growing flax on our farm in Elsie, Oregon for the last 8 or 9 years. And I'm definitely losing track. And so it's been a while, but we came together, Shannon and I, over the development of natural fibers in our region, and then it blossomed into this sort of commercial side of developing or reviving organ linen, and then also the broader context of reviving linen in general for North America. So we have been on a long journey that probably will never end, but we really love it. So we just keep going, and have been very blessed to know a lot of you on this call and gather all your information and expertise to garner a much bigger focus for bringing linen back. So here's our slides.
So this is some images of a festival that used to happen every year in Oregon in the probably between the 40s and 50s. And it was one of the largest community gatherings in the area. It's in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, and that's where most of our flax industry was happening. At the height of the industry, we had about 18,000 acres growing and 14 processing mills. We went all the way from the field through to finished goods. And much of the industry, the infrastructure for the industry was built up through the Federal Works Progress Administration that came out, kind of came through the end of World War II, and an answer to bringing industry to rural Oregon. Flax was definitely a celebrated crop, as you can see. Everyone in the community was involved. They had a flax queen. We got to meet the son of one of the women in the 40s who was a flax queen. And so it's a very lovely story. And there is a real push in Oregon to bring flax back. So Fibershed, which is what Angela and me, kind of a movement that Angela and me have been working within, embraces this soil to soil vision. And so we have been working within our region to kind of start connecting the pieces of this system. I've been working with Fibershed for about a decade now, and when I entered into it, I was pretty naive. I just assumed all these things were somehow present, even at a small scale, and then started realizing for North America, flax processing has completely went away. No one's been growing it. And so the industry died mostly for all the other reasons that happened around the world, but much of it was nylon, the end of World War II, and all those things started to contribute. We have been, Angela and me, have been working to kind of build each of these pieces in some capacity in our region, but then also taking this kind of soil to soil vision, because there's regions all through the US, and working together with the other regions to start creating supply chains and consistent quality to the flax. So it's a big endeavor, but it's definitely something we see needs to happen. Part of what has really sparked or inspired our community is we've had a lot of community events where we bring people out to the fields, we let them get their hands on flax, see how it grows. And like the previous speaker said, there is lots of hand tools around, and we've made hand tools. So everything's by hand. We have no machinery. We don't have a puller. We have, it's all hand. There's also been a real spark in what grows here. So we have animal fibers. We grow beautiful indigo and plant dye materials, and bast fibers like flax and hemp grow wonderfully here in our soil. So we've been working to kind of work with other farmers and other groups in our region that are invigorating these systems. It's been very exciting and very successful. So where do you start? Angela and me, we had a vision, and once we got into it, we realized there's no seed. Accessing fiber flax seed in North America is a big challenge. We grow a lot of oilseed flax, but not fiber flax varieties. So we were able to tap into some resources at Oregon State University. They have done quite a few trials throughout the years on flax, and we got a small quantity of seed. We were able to work with a seed breeder, Jennifer Kling, who has been breeding varieties of flax that are most adapted to our current climatic conditions and soil. And this past year, even throughout COVID, we were able to harvest, with the help of a farmer friend in Montana, 19,000 pounds of fiber flax seed. So it's taken us about 4 or 5 years to get here, but it's a pretty exciting milestone for us.
So we sold into about over a dozen, maybe 14 or 15 different locations in the United States. And you can see it sort of stretches a band across the top there, the best latitude for growing flax, that it's repeated around the world. So it's probably the same in all of your areas as well, except for our outlier in Texas. But they're very innovative there, so they try everything. And we've seen a market increase in interest overall in flax production, and from every size, from like backyard growers all the way to like 4 or 5 acres, and doing a lot of crop rotation on larger organic farms. Our premise is organic because that's my background, and we've constantly put forth that if we're going to revive this natural fiber, we don't want to bring it back, with harsh, conventional farming, and we want to have a much more integrated and whole farm view about fiber development within the food system. So we've been really pushing organic production. So our seed this year will be 100% organic, and last year we had 10 acres of transitional coming in, and that is now certified. So we've made a lot of partnerships, not just with farms, but also with other fiber shed groups all over the US. And they, everybody's got a different story of how they came to flax, but mostly it's adaptability to that region. And we can't grow cotton in the north, and also it's flax doesn't take any water normally. Well, I can't say normally anymore. So with climate change, there's no normal. So right now, some of our areas don't take water and some need it. It totally depends on what's happening and what hurricane's hitting your state. So we've had a lot of disruption within the whole overall like growing seasons and agricultural supply chains within North America due to these very dramatic storm events. And it's kind of surprising how well flax has weathered it. And we've seen increasingly that the varieties that we've been able to revive from the Oregon State University seed bank have a parentage of a little bit of linseed in the background, and that has some drought tolerance aspects to it. And so the Lenore variety that we've been able to commercially increase actually survived where others didn't, especially in the extreme drought conditions that we had in the West this summer, or continue to have, actually, because it hasn't rained yet. So we're
that's 2 minutes, Angela. Thanks.
We're definitely in a tight pickle about how we can make a bioregional expression of flax that includes all of these different aspects and challenges. And that's the versatility of seed and also locations to grow. So you can see across the US that we have quite a bit of space to experiment in. and a lot of different crops to rotate through. But how do we process it? So I don't know what it is about the United States, but we have a penchant for scrapping everything. So we, of all those mills that we had in Oregon, there isn't any left except this one, which is a very tiny little location in Canby, Oregon. And ironically, there's some barber machinery cards and combs that are still there. There's 2 of them, and it is surprising that we haven't been able to find hardly anything else, including the pullers and all the mechanization in the field that occurred through the Oregon State Agricultural College early on in the early part of the century. So all of those things exist only in plans and only in archives, and we've been able to collect a substantial like too much paperwork probably to get through, but we've been collecting quite a bit of stuff to try and figure out what can we utilize from the past and how can we mechanize it here in the United States on a small scale. And pulling machinery from Europe is definitely a possibility, but these days, this last year, with COVID restrictions on all the transportation and disruptions, it's impossible, if not more expensive than we could ever do. So we've been looking back at the possibility of developing a supply chain domestically in the United States and within North America as well, that will really focus on small producers and then be able to replicate the entire supply chain here, from the seed that we're growing in the field all the way up to actual finished product. Can you go to the next slide? So we post quite a bit of educational material and updates on our Instagram. It's probably the best way to reach us. And we have been trying to get everyone together under a banner of the North American Linen Association. This is our next venture, is to pull everything together so that we have a place to put all our resources and a focus, and we can, distribute, all kinds of information through an association essentially like the CELC in Europe. And we are this next fall going to be really focusing on getting all of our ducks in a row, I guess, and pulling together this organization under a nonprofit, and then have a place for everybody in working committees that will allow us to build up different aspects of this industry so that we can have replication and we can be stronger and more resilient in the face of anything that's to come. And we don't know what that is, obviously. So adaptable plans, that's our motto. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Shannon and Angela, both, we spoke, well, that was the wee small hours for me when we spoke at the last time during lockdown. And this time it's the wee small hours for you. Thank you for getting up so early. I think you just had a hideous storm and everything. I mean, it was really, you really were put through the mill, to use a phrase. I'm going to not say too much more, but I want to bring in Rosie Bristow, who I met very recently, the most recent member of the team that I've met here today. And Rosie is going to tackle some of that question. I love the intensity of your work on seed, and that's super important. Rosie's going to have a little chat about those interim bits of machinery. I was fascinated to hear that the hand tools are still available in Finland, and that in fact growing flax, quite recent, but a lot of the mechanization has gone from Oregon. Rosie, would you like to come in?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep, good.
Yeah, I thought that was such an interesting presentation. I guess my main question for you guys was just in terms of scale. You said everything's hand done at the moment, but would you hope to scale back up if possible, or is there a point where you think it's nicer if it's smaller? Is there sort of like an ideal scale that you'd want to work at?
Yeah, we're both. Yes, we. I think it depends on the region in the U.S. For Oregon, Angela, there's a lot of cropland here that can grow flax, and it works well with the rotations of crops we have. So we have kind of a mid-scale plan for a mill here that we envision could be replicated in other regions. Some areas have just smaller landmass to work with, so they might be looking for smaller scale equipment. We've looked into like Taproot in Nova Scotia that has been making kind of that small scale processing. So we definitely want to scale up, but on a regional, with a regional vision instead of, you know, a couple of giant industrial mills that are kind of centralized. Yeah.
I should have introduced Rosie better there. Rosie's doing a master's at Heriot University and has gone down, as Helen's let us know, the rabbit hole, which is flax and linen. But Rosie, would you like to tell us a little bit about the machinery that you're developing?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was going to be talking about my own project or
just a little
question. Yeah, so I've been working with Simon from Flaxland, who I think is also on the call somewhere, and building a rotor heckler and also a roller breaker up here in Scotland. And I'm hoping we'll be putting them on display tomorrow, actually, as part of the Flax and Linen Festival. So yeah, we're kind of right in the middle of figuring out what scale of processing works. And at the moment, they're like hand-turned machines, but they're definitely the next scale up from sort of small wooden hand brakes and that kind of thing. Yeah, we actually literally just finished building the rotor heckler today just before the call started, so I'll be able to put up a video on Instagram probably later this afternoon.
Excellent. And we'll have one tomorrow when you're visiting us in Kirkcaldy. So look, we've got 10 minutes before we want to do our stretch a leg break and then go into our second hour. What fantastic presentations. There's so much richness in that journey that we've gone from in this growing of flax. A number of questions bubbled up. I don't want to deny anyone a chance to respond, but there was a question about the used retting liquor. I should say that on Helen and her husband are developing some machinery, and it's a very impressive setup. I can't remember where it came from, Helen, but there was a question for you about that retting liquor and how that might be used.
Yeah, we're actually just starting a project along with Jane, looking at how that retting liquor can be used as fertilizer, just to do some analysis and so on it. We think it's probably very similar to, I'm sure some of you have bought or used nettle fertilizer, a nice organic fertilizer that you can buy, which is basically the same sort of process as we're using for retting the flax. So we're starting a little project just to look at, you know, whether we could even I mean, we'll use it on our farm anyway. We draw it out of the tank and spread it on the fields, and it's good. It's just putting all the nutrient that's come out of the flax is going back on the fields, so it makes total sense. But we're starting a little project with Queen's University to look at using that liquor.
Wonderful. I think those university links have proven very fruitful for a number of projects, and where that can happen, that's great. Rosie gave a little nod to Simon there in Flaxland. Simon, I don't know if you want to come in to tell us a little bit about what makes it a successful crop. I'm grateful to you for supplying seed. We've been growing flax in small flax circles around Fife, as it would have been grown in the 1820s. So thanks to all our festival hosts for growing flax again in Scotland, and it was your seed.
Yes, actually, on the question of seed, as you know, we had a lot of difficulty this year, and it's thanks to Rosie for sharing out some of her seed that many of these projects are carrying on at the moment. There's been a difficulty as the flax seed isn't registered in the UK, but hopefully that problem is going to be resolved. So so obviously getting good seed is the first stage. You will find really in farming, most of these projects, you've got to go with what soil you've got. And really, you've just got to have a go and try it where you are. One thing I would say is, this year there's a great variation in how well the crop has grown, and a lot of it is down to the climate. And we are actually struggling. We struggled for 2 years running due to a very dry climate in the planting season, and that's resulted in poor fibre. And it is sort of almost an irony that at the moment we're actually trying to do something to help with the environment and get a more natural fibre growing, that we're being almost being shot in the foot by the thing we're actually trying to stop, and to get a good crop established. Yeah, I mean, I think it is just great that so many people are starting to grow flax on a small scale. The educating of growing flax, to learn how to grow it, to know how to ret it, all takes time. And by starting off on a smaller scale and working up through the stages, I think is a really sort of positive way to be working. You know, if the government gave us 200 million and we said set up a flax industry, it wouldn't be a great deal of interest to a lot of people. And it wouldn't really be worth doing, because we don't actually haven't gained enough experience to set up full-scale manufacture. So this staged approach is really excellent way to be working.
Thanks, Simon. I think what also struck me, and thank you for the wonderful images that were supplied by our presenters, was how extraordinary a community endeavour a lot of this has been. I have a picture of a number of people pulling flax on Helen's farm. We saw Sirpa give a nod to Matti, and it's been a family affair in Finland. And as we saw from Oregon, that community aspect of things, and I don't think that can be underestimated. I really feel strongly about the well-being of locality when it comes to these projects. We are bringing people together in a kind of creative fellowship that really gives people a sense of place and a sense of person. That's enormously beneficial to individual and community well-being. So look, we're at, is there another question anyone would like to pitch before we just take a 5-minute stretch of legs? You can either just unmute or you can ask something in the chat. Okay, look, let's take 2 minutes. It is, according to my watch, 14:58, 15:05. We'll regroup. I'm just going to show some images on the screen while we do that together. This is the first of a set of seasonal, we'll call them flax circles, informal roundtables that we hope to be able to organise to learn from each other and generate that wonderful community aspect that Angela and Shannon were talking about in terms of learning together in this fibre network. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but this second hour is about the wider culture that Flaxland offers both to individuals, communities, to place. And I'd like to start by introducing someone who I've not met in person, but who I hope very much to meet in the next couple of years. COVID has stopped us, a lot of us getting together, a lot of us traveling. I'd hoped to have Christiane Seufferlein with us here in Scotland for our festival. We certainly have her flax in the festival, her, excuse me, her wonderful Berta's Flax project. It's one of a number of international textile community projects. This one touched my heart, a very real reference to a local culture that's become global thanks to the generosity of Christiane. So I'd like to hand over to Austria. Come in, Austria.
Hello. Thank you, John, for inviting me. And I'm really thrilled to be here and to tell you a little bit about my project, Berta's Flax. So I come in a little bit before the projects you all have built up. So I come in to make people interested in flax. And this project really kind of happened to me. I did not plan for it. I'm a teacher of spinning and natural dyeing, and I live in a very rural and in a very remote part of Austria called Mühlviertel. And in my region, flax growing was a very big industry till the 50s, and a lot of people were involved in flax production, and our region was very famous for flax. And because it was such a valuable fiber, it was common that brides, or sometimes even grooms, got a big box and a big chest of flax and linen for their wedding as a dowry. And those flax chests are still around. I will show you pictures of those flax chests when I'm finished talking. And what I can show you is the flax itself. It looks like this and this in these boxes. And the boxes have been a life insurance for women in this area. So whenever something would happen to your family, or you had a failed crop or whatever, you could sell the very valuable flax strix or linen. And so it would never have been used for fun. So people treasured those chests a lot. And that's the reason why so many are still around. So the tradition of giving flax boxes or chests for weddings finished in the 60s, but came a long, long way. And at the moment, I see flax chests from the 1890s, 1850s even. And how did this all come to me? A person, a man whose mother died, found one of those boxes in the basement and wanted to have it a good home, which is not often the case because those chests have been buried or burned for years now, because people don't know what to do with those flax strix. And this man wanted to have a good home for its flax chest, and he brought me a huge chest in spring this year. And I was happy to have it, but I would never been able to spin it all. It's close to 100 kilos of flax in one of those chests. And so I started to give it out and give it away to other spinners and weavers internationally via Facebook. And within a week or something, the box was empty. So it was a huge request. Many people wanted to have one streak, and I gave them out. And I told this story to a friend of mine who is a journalist, and she wrote a little article about it in our local newspaper. And from then on, it went crazy, because a lot of old people kept calling me, oh, I have flax as well. Oh, I have linen as well. Please collect it. Please get it. I want to have it a good home as well. So I started to travel around and not only collect flax, but hear the stories behind the flax. And this was such a wholesome experience for me and for those people, because they were able to tell their stories, and they were able to tell what flax meant to them, what linen meant to them. And I took those stories and brought it back to Facebook, to this group we now had created, Berta's Flax. And I started to tell about all the old men and women who were working with flax and show their flax and gave out their flax. And so I didn't do anything to start this, but it did itself. And the story spread, and the people were more and more interested, not only in the flax and in the linen, but in the stories behind it. And so without really doing it, a network formed where people were interested not only in spinning and the technique or the growing, but also in the stories and the history, not only about my people, but also, oh, let's think about who grow flax in my region. So it really started this process of thinking about flax and opened a new dimension of dealing with the fiber. So people started to think about flax who had never spun before, or who had never spun flax before. Or I have even some people in the group who don't spin or weave, but use it in different projects. So flax at the moment in Berta's Flax this group is just this vehicle to transport a lot of different things about this fiber. And all this happened because of this one box. And at the moment I have about close to 2,000 members in Berta's Flax group. And we sent out almost 500 parcels in the whole world, which translates to almost a ton of vintage flax. And all my flax is about between 80 and 120 years old, but it still is as good as new. So you can still spin it. And what happens now is we have created not only a web of people, but a connection from the past to the present. And now a lot of members of the Berta's Flax group start to do heirloom projects for the future, so for their children or their grandchildren. So what is so amazing for me is that this flax just talked to so many different generations, and we can still use it. Yeah, that's the main idea behind Berta's Flax. And I now want to show you some of the pictures of this flax. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So, oh, now, yeah, now I have it. It should work now.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is Berta, the original Berta. I think it was in her 50s, and here you can see her wedding pictures. She married in the late 40s. And it was a tradition to show off the dowry. So when the woman, when the marriage was on the day of the wedding, the box was brought from the woman's house to the new home and was shown off in the village and was serenaded by music. So this is also from Berta's original Berta's Flax chests. This is the chest in all its glory. So this is how I got it. And you can see the different colors in flax, which means that it's not from 1 year, because those chests have been collected over the years. So maybe in this chest, there's flax from the last 50 years of a family's life. And also linen, I find a lot of linen. It's all hand spun, hand woven. It's also in those chests sometimes. And a lot of the chests are really nicely decorated. This is from 1920, this chest. And this is how they are stacked. So very neatly, very shiny. This flax is 80 years old. And again, the decoration over this time was paper flowers, and it's Rosa's flax. Very nice lady who gifted her chest of flax to me and to the project. Another way of decorating and stacking. So I think it's very beautiful how they are arranged. Sometimes I also get textiles, ready-made textiles. The blue and white checked one is a pillowcase, and on the other side you see not only flax towels or linen towels, but flax thread, which was also almost always in those boxes. And sometimes I even get other textiles and nightgowns and ready-made textiles in those boxes. And if I don't take it or if I don't save it, a lot of it would have gone to the skip. Yeah, so that's a little bit about Berta's Flax. At the moment, we are working on making it an official community, an official guild or something, because I really want to continue this work and to continue to buy flax, to listen to the stories, to collect the stories, maybe making a book or some place to keep it for future generations. And I really want to inspire young people via those stories to look at flax and to look at linen and to maybe find a different way into this beautiful fiber they haven't found before. Thank you.
Christiane, thank you so much for that presentation. Very heartwarming. And as I was suggesting, something intensely personal that's become a beautiful part of a much bigger community. Did you say 2,000 folk? I mean,
yeah,
a ton of Szikriszt, fabulous. I mean, just a beautiful project. And there is one, Angela is waving. I don't have mine with me, but I know Paul is there. I know Paul, there we go. So a number of us have had the joy of receiving your flax, and you know, what a wonderful project. I think there's something there about the valuing of the process of textile. I think that's something that came up and was mentioned by Sirpa and by Jane and all of us really. It is this notion that perhaps we buy less but with greater quality, and that we think hard about the entire process, the value of a piece of textile in its totality in this urgent need of climate change revision and understanding that process. I think what your project's also doing is allowing us to value this intense nature of textiles. We come to it in different ways, but revalue it with these local stories made international are very important. I had hoped to have someone, and there may be someone in the room who would like to unmute and talk to us, but I hope to get someone to respond, but they weren't available, around the Swedish project, IkvmLIN. They now have, from a beautiful project, growing 1 meter squared of flax, they now have 2,500 folk in Sweden and beyond Sweden in other Nordic countries growing flax. That's also a project about revaluing the nature of textile. Is anyone in the room who would like to talk a little bit about IkvmLIN? Anyone from Sweden with us? No. Well, a wonderful project. Again, Christiane, congratulations on using social media in such a beautiful way. It's a really wonderful example, and you very generously allow folks into Berta's Flax group, and it's been a joy to witness what other people have done with their Szikriszt, be them displaying them or spinning them, and some have gone on to make linen pieces. Congratulations on the wonderful project. Very nicely into a recipient of flax, and I do want to share screen if I may. Just by way of introduction, this is on Helen's farm, and there's Fiona waving at us, Fiona McKelvey, who's in the audience today. Lovely to see you, Fiona. And that's a little bit about the community aspects of this. I'm hoping I can get this to move on. That is 2018, Shannon and Angela, and that was in Lisburn when we took our Linen Stories exhibition into the cathedral there and talked a little bit about the Huguenot migration. And next picture, if we can, that's Rosie and her machine. And there's some of Berta's flax in the current exhibition in Kirkcaldy as part of you can see the bottle of retting flax there. Now, was there ever a stranger thing happened to me? I saw this chap on Facebook again, actually through Berta's Flax, and I chased him down and he agreed to meet me in London. I've never met anyone in a public park spinning, and I got my lesson and I was very grateful to him. And I just, by way of introduction, this was to say hello to Paul Henry. Paul, would you like to come in?
Hello, thank you. I often spin in public, so it's not unusual for me. My background has a little bit of textiles in it, and very recently I found out that both great uncles on both sides of my family, I'm from Northern Ireland, one was involved as the supervisor of a retting mill for Morsky linen works. I only found this out 2 weeks ago. And the other one was a supervisor in the accounts department, so not sure that counts, in York Street Flax Spinning, one of the largest linen flax spinning mills in the world at that time. Anyway, my involvement is with primary school children. It's part of a project that was set up by somebody called Cassie Liversidge, who wanted to introduce gardens into school playgrounds. And she set aside little areas where they can grow vegetables, fruit, herbs. She started growing wheat, and the children processed the wheat later on. And I got involved when she was doing flax. So my thing is getting the children involved with the whole process of how you grow, process, spin, and weave flax. The children I work with are 7, 8, 9 years old, so it's all quite young. But we do the whole process, right from sowing the seed. If I can find it, sorry. We take it as part of the education. So we use lots of leaflets and information from all sorts of places that have a history of flax. And one of the things that we're constantly involved in is that this is not just us, it's a worldwide thing. So all around the world, people are doing or have done over the years this type of project. We sort of specialize in the let's get the children interested. And one of the ways we found that was best with this was actually to focus on ancient Egypt. So what we do is we actually process it in a similar way and spin it and weave it as it might have been done 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. They do all the processing themselves. I come in after the retting, which they particularly enjoy because it's nasty and smelly. I come in with a box of tools. Oops, a box of tools. I travel on the tube across London, and I spin on the tube, much to the amusement of everyone in the carriage, but it's a long journey. We use line flax that they have produced. We start with breaking. We're not allowed machinery, so we use wooden blocks, wooden mallets to break it. We use rubber gloves, gardening gloves, and they are remarkably useful for small quantities of scutching. And then we use a selection of different size combs to hackle, and then we get into spinning. I use drop spindles. It means that every child can have a go. It's not always successful, but it's always fun most of the time. I demonstrate, we've got maybe 25 or 30 children, and I take them in groups of 6 or 7, and we all have a go. So every child has a chance to do each operation. The quality is not brilliant at the end of the day, but I don't care. It's all useful. And one of the things is, you can see it's thick and thin, doesn't matter. I spin some more and then I ply it to make a reasonably coherent yarn, which in the past I knit items of clothing for a silhouette man on each school wall. So we had a hat, a jumper, trousers, we had socks, but we stopped that because we thought we could involve the children in another process, and knitting was just going to be too difficult. But weaving, so I started up the back strap weaving, which is again a recognizable Egyptian one. Instead of trees or posts, we've got children, but we've got heddles. I cheat by using a commercial linen warp, but all the weft is the school's production. They produce this. It's mummy bandages, and the ultimate goal is each school has a paper mache model cat, and each one is going to be wound with mummy bandages, and every year they'll get an extra wrap around it. Each school might only produce a meter and a half of bandage, but that's fine. And again, this is something that we're very aware of. At the bottom of this picture is original Egyptian bandage, slightly coarse one, but original. And then above is what we can produce. Sometimes I leave it in the natural color. Sometimes I finish it and wash it and boil it so it's light.
That's 2 minutes, Paul.
Thank you. It's whatever we do at the time. One of the things that we're constantly doing is trying to instill that it takes time. Everything's valuable. It takes a whole class to produce a meter of cloth, a meter of ribbon. That's very valuable. We compare and contrast it with the t-shirts or the shirts or the jumpers that we're wearing. I'm a kilt maker and I always go kilted. And we talk about how long it would take to weave a length of cloth for a kilt. And whether or not we're using flax to make linen or wool or cotton or other fibers, it's very much the same process involved. And what we're trying to do is make everyone aware that there is a price of value to the work. We have to work together. We need processors, we need spinners, we need weavers, we need farmers, we need everybody to work together. And that's one of the things that's at the root of doing these projects within schools. We're working as a community, which was a nice echo to earlier presentations. We need to work together. Thank you.
Paul, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. A very rich presentation. It was wonderful to get that experience chatting with you in the park. Absolutely. I think our Linen Stories attempts to traverse art, design and industry, and ultimately it is about jobs for folk. It is about a living. It is about appreciation of what we choose to consume, and educationally we can use the proxy, if you like, of flax and linen in so many ways, with the younger kids, with the secondary school age, at university level, as we talked about, and right across that instill all those wonderful notions of ecology, biodiversity, valuing textile. All these things have great impact when they're demonstrated so wonderfully as you have done. Peter Szikriszt, I'm going to attempt.
Yeah, it's Szikriszt. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I have been participating in this year's one IkvmLIN, and that is actually 1 square meter of flax. And it's a project started by the Handicraft Society, and it gets some funding also from the state. And it's members all over Sweden actually, and they grow after their own possibilities. And we get the seeds sent out, and I think it was 15 grams or so, and also letters, mails, and information about what to do. And so far it has went very well actually. And later this autumn there are going to be gatherings for handling the linen. But so far,
hey,
this is my square meter.
Well done.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that is rated already, but I'm looking forward to have it as a yarn also. There are a lot of small spinning machines for the household in Sweden. Mostly have been just for decorational use, the latest 100 years or something like that. So probably they're not functioning that good, but there is still a lot of smaller machines that is available all around. But I think that the spinning is the most tricky part actually in the whole process. So I would welcome some kind of central spinning function that we can use to get our own yarns from what we have sewn.
Thank you, Peter. That's a very interesting reflection as well on the that crucial stage of spinning being a tricky one. And I think a number of us who've been thinking about this have recognized that as a stage that is difficult. Hand spinning is a long process. We've heard from Paul already. To increase the capacity for that, perhaps with some sort of central resource, sounds a very interesting idea. So yes, I'd recommend everyone have a look at the IkvmLIN project as well. In a different way than Berta's Flax, it is also a local story with a transnational, international link. And of course, it is being used in schools as well, much as Paul has demonstrated in East London. I've been in touch with module creators of the Ulster Scots linen educational module in Northern Ireland. And just on Friday, one of our first guests into the exhibition, retired school mistress from the north of Fife, who across north of Fife, while she was in post, had developed an educational module at secondary school level. So there's certainly potential. Like all these things, as we're seeing in this room, something about the individuals being caught, you know, developing a passion for the project lets these things happen. In preparation for this talk today, I had a lovely chat with Greet and Sylvie in Belgium, who are in the room today, and we all found out we were wearing the blue of flax. So we had a chuckle ahead of our chat, and it's a delight to welcome Sylvie de Costa and Greet Verstraat to the talk this afternoon. And I'm not sure, is it yourself, Sylvie, who will lead off?
Yes, I will do it.
Welcome. And from Texture Museum in Kortrijk in Belgium, a very resonant town for many Europeans. The Scots and the Irish both did a lot of trading up to the 50s in Kortrijk, which was the centre. Indeed, there's a Belfast Strasse not far from the Texture Museum. And we're tracing there's a lovely story that the Scots and the Irish were together in that wonderful trading bloc. And the Irish were known to like a drink and the Scots to drive a hard bargain. So we were a canny bunch, all told. Over to you, Sylvie.
All right. Yeah, there we are. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, John, of course, for the introduction. So in my talk today, I would like to share our story about the choices we made and why we made them, not only in the museum itself, but also in the ways we reach out and we try to make the flax story relevant to a wide and diverse audience. Because although Texture is a relatively small museum in a city that's probably not on your A-list tourist destination, it has a unique collection, and that allows us to share an internationally relevant historical narrative that's deeply rooted in the region's DNA. And in the context of this roundtable, I propose to focus more specifically on the community participation and creating value for tourism. But maybe let me start with a short history lesson, because from the 1850s, a new industry sprung up along the banks of the River Lys and went on to conquer the world, and that was the flax processing. Grow Flax was known as the best flax available, and the city became an important hub in the international flax trade. Today, you can still see traces of this industry all over the region, in the landscape, in the many businesses rooted in the flax industry, and maybe even in the inhabitants' mindset. And more than a century, flax processing brings wealth and employment, but it was hard hit by the crisis at the end of the 60s. And many people realized that an important chapter in our past would be lost, and they went out to look for tools and machines and clothing and photographs. And so the museum was a private, very bottom-up initiative, really a museum by and for the flax community. And for most of the people in those days, visiting it was like taking a walk through their own past. It was a very nostalgic experience, but over time, the number who had experienced these glory days of the flax industry obviously decreased, as did the museum's visitors. And this became the main challenge for us, in fact, how to share this fascinating flax story with an audience that often doesn't even know the word flax anymore. And an important decision for us was that we moved to a new location, and that was a flax warehouse of the linen thread company next to the River Lys that's so important for our story. And we're now situated in the city center, touristically more interesting and more meaningful. And the architects transformed it and gave it a modern look and feel. And they used industrial elements to really highlight the past of the building, creating an open space that reminds of the constant buzz and the activities of the old days. And flex is also used in the museum's interior with flex board panels, linoleum flooring, flex insulation, linen curtains, so that the building itself is a testimony of the versatility of the flex products as well. It's a sort of practice what you preach, you could say. And although flex is still the main theme, the story has been expanded to an inspiring experience about entrepreneurship and craftsmanship in textiles. And so we developed 3 galleries, 3 floors with 3 different atmospheres. So let me walk you through them very quickly. So the visit starts in the Wunderkammer, and that's a very tactile, interactive DIY lab where you can test, smell, feel, taste the different projects of this wonderful plant. And it's really to discover that's not something only of the past, but actually still very relevant today, and that designers and scientists and entrepreneurs leave no part of it unused. And then in the list room, that's the 2nd floor, we dive back in time. And there we learn about how the flex industry was really the driving force in the economic development from an agricultural region or an agricultural area to what we call the Texas of Flanders today. And that's a fascinating history with thinkers and risk takers in the leading role. And that's told via objects, but also via testimonials, animations, and interactive tables. And then at the 2nd floor, you will find the treasury. And that's a more intimate room to marvel at the beautiful linen damasks, the laces, and fine fabrics from our textile collection of almost 12,000 objects. And that's more in temporary presentations. And that's where we invite also curators from different backgrounds, like, for example, the Dutch trend watcher Lee Edelkoort, maybe you know her, for a fresh take on our collection. But that's only the bricks, of course. So let me shift over to our audience development, because there we try to choose, we chose to make the difference with small-sized rather, but innovative projects. And we try to connect the region's rich flex heritage and contemporary industrial society. And we love those synergies at the crossroads of heritage and crafts and innovation. And we try to become an open museum that invites artists and artisans and the industry and, of course, the public to explore new aspects or to challenge it. And so community participation is therefore something that we really try to embrace. An example maybe, that's the TexLab project. That's our label where artists and designers are connected to family-run businesses in the region. And the result is a meeting of all techniques and high-tech production, which is always linked to the collection of the museum or the story of the museum. And for texture, it's never simply a design assignment, but for us, it's rather a different way of storytelling with a strong focus on participation of specific communities. Let me give you an example. Our 3rd TexLab, for example, was the perfume of the River Lys. And that's about the texture has a material collection, but that stories and memories are as important. And we had the feeling that one element was missing in the museum, and that was the smell. Because everyone who grew up in the flex knows that the whole region really bathed in a special fragrance during the retting season. So the perfume of the River Lys. And some believe it was a smell of wealth, but for others it was only an unbearable stench. And in any way, it belongs really to the collective memory of the region. And it brings out a lot of stories about youth, about summer, about hard work. And this was the ideal starting point for Peter de Kupperen. And he's a Belgian olfactoric artist. And it was quite a challenge for him to reproduce this smell in this lab because, as some of you may know, retting in the rivers is prohibited since the 1940s. But luckily, he could count on the experience of the last flex company, Montmorency, using bunkers for artificial retting. And there you could still see a meadow full of drying flex chapels in summer. Important to know in this project is that that a group of former flex workers is still connected to the museum, and they are called the Friends of Flex. Average age, I think, 85 years, but with an incredible source of stories about flex heritage and technical knowledge. And they were as a council or the wise or a smell panel, as we know them, they were involved in this process to see if it was possible to capture this intangible heritage in a perfume bottle. And the result was a unique installation, but also a strong program about smell and memory, perfume workshops, a video booth, slam poetry. And we even managed to get the exact scientific formula to produce liters and liters of retting water for eternity. My second case is more related to tourism. As I told you, the story is so connected with the region. We really want the people to go out, not only stay in the museum, but really go out and discover it themselves. And the combination of authentic relics and traces in the landscapes invites to visit the region, and the flax heritage in that way becomes really a theme for ecotourism and regional marketing. We're very lucky to be at the crossroads of a large Flemish cycling network. So we develop every year's flax safaris, and that's inspired by a flax spinner in the 50s who always went on a so-called safari to the Normandy to go and check on the quality of the flax fields himself. And so we invite people to spot as many flax fields as they can. And in Belgium, COVID made everybody rediscover the joy of walking and cycling. And this kind of ecotourism really gives a glimpse, I think, of agricultural life behind the corner. Of course, it's important that this was also supported by a media mix of a website, an app, a print campaign, and a social media campaign around the figure of Lynette. That's a figure of Arnaud van Robijs. A little bit of a gimmick, but also a poetic way, I think, to show beauty and life as it is between the growing flax. And apparently she has already some friends all over Europe, Marijke, Maya and Lino, I think, doing the same thing. So it would be great if you could make it in an international story next year. So any candidates are always welcome. And we believe also that inspiring industrial sites with new destinations, like for example here a B&B or a restaurant, can stimulate people also to embrace this part of their heritage. Because if this is properly done with an architecture of high quality, it can even have real touristic value as well. And it's our experience that if you can slide in some of these more lifestyle points of interest next to the heritage, like creative hotspots or pop-up summer bars or kids-proof events or company visits even, it's more likely that touristic partners will be happy to pick it up. And for us, I think this extramuros program, as you call it, maybe doesn't bring in one-on-one extra visitors to the museum, but we hope it's really created an awareness of the living flax sector today as a small, maybe, but an important economic sector. And I think if this tempts people to know more about this versatile crop, then we gained. And so maybe to conclude, I think the museum has been built by and for the people of the region, and we invested a lot of time to and effort also to detect this passion and the stories of the flax workers and to share them with the region. And we want to take care of this heritage, of course, but also make it relevant for tomorrow at the crossroads of looking back and thinking forward, of craft and technology, and also always with an open mind. So as I try to show you today, I think community participation and regional marketing are important tools for us in our audience development. And I hope to welcome you in the following months or years, maybe, to discover our story about passion, about product innovation, about the families behind the machines, about trial and error, about ups and downs, about perseverance. So I say, let's meet in Kortrijk. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sylvie. Great. Would you like to come in at this point? Thank you for putting the links in. Sylvia, just a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I've enjoyed my 3 visits. It's been a mecca for me. Really a really destination within the Kortrijk and Flanders region. Really beautiful. Great. Would you like to come in at all?
Yes. Hello.
Welcome.
I was thinking about the reason why we organize those cycling tours. And that's a good idea, maybe for tourism as a whole, because there is a link with flax all over. You can visit a region at a certain amazing tempo. You also have the opportunity to see a flax field growing, which is not obvious for most of us because it is difficult to discover. And therefore, we had set up a map with different points of interest, which is, of course, on social media, and where you can find growing crops. So that is interesting for seeing the flax flowers. It's also interesting because there's a link with a bike. Maybe you mentioned, or you saw it in the presentation of Sylvie, but in the Museum of Texture, we present a bicycle. So that's, why is that? Because in the modern materials, flax is being used. So not everybody knows that, but that's a nice link between the cycling tour and the flax product. A third thing is that you have to be aware that flax crops is always on different places. So if you want to look out for those places, we had mentioned it in one of the presentations, that you need to change every year, the place where flax is being grown. So that makes the discovery of those places more special. I would compare it with the Japanese tradition of having the wonderful trees, I don't know the word in English, the cherry trees,
yes.
Cherry trees, which is a huge tradition there. We should have this about the flax growing beautifully fields and beautiful blue weaving. It's like a poem. So if we could do this all over our flax countries, this would be amazing. We should make each other more strong to have a kind of worship for those blue, beautiful flowers. And the bike is a very good idea, to make use of the bike for discovering those blue, beautiful fields. So that's what we're trying to do, and what maybe could be an issue for us to share.
Great, thank you so much, Sylvie, for your presentation. I'm just going to reflect on my 2018 bike ride in Flanders, and the first time that I saw a flax field in any extent. And it was past the blue flowering stage, at that lovely silvery green seed head stage, and the whole thing, it's a very handsome crop, vertical, the whole thing was just like the most beautiful ocean waving in. It was romantic and emotional.
So you always remember the first time, so that's important.
Yes. 100 years ago, you wouldn't have grown up in Northern Ireland without knowing what a blue field of flax was like. It was 200 years ago, the 1820s, when that was last a common sight in Scotland. But we've seen a little bit of it in the last month with our festival growers here in Scotland. Look, as usual, we've run out of time for an extensive set of questions, but I hope we've had some flavor of what it might be to invest in the growing of flax, the processing of flax, the development of an appreciation of flax, educational community and tourism potential of this extraordinary product. I'd like to just leave you with the notion of, well, first of all, I should ask, are there any other, there's some wonderful comments in the chat section. Thank you very much for everyone participating. Does anyone have any burning questions for Sylvie? I see Mark Watson of Historic Environment Scotland was asked about the building itself. Actually, it was an old, not a mill, but a storage unit, isn't that correct? That has been redeveloped as the museum. Any other questions just now? Look, I would love to populate this with some, oh, Angela, go for it.
I just wanted to ask Sylvie if you can talk about the third floor at Texture, where there's visiting exhibits of all kinds of different political and, like, you know, textile related curated projects.
I think you are talking about textile and resistance exhibition.
Yes, that one.
Yeah. That was an exhibition that we presented together with the Fashion Museum in Antwerp. And it was just one example because we as I explained, flax is still the main theme of our museum, but in our presentation or in our exhibition policy, we try to broaden that up, and we really try to be a museum of textiles in general, because that's also has to do with the region and the city of Kortrijk. That's a UNESCO Creative City of Design with a lot of textile players, mostly in technical textiles, and also with the industry and many educational institutions in the area. So that's a theme that's really important for our region, and so we try to work on that as well. But textile as a way to speak about diversity and a way to reach out to different communities. It's really an international language, and we try to work on that as well. So and that exhibition was an example of that. It's not so easy because I don't like how do you say specific projects or something. I think it need to really to spread out in every aspects of the way you work as a museum, also front office, back office. So it's not so easy to do with all these little things. We try to be as open and as open-minded to all kind of communities as we can.
Thank you so much, and thanks. A few words about our festival here in Scotland. We have taken a temporality on it. We're going to make it a triennale. So every 3 years, every other year or every second year doesn't quite give enough time for creative projects to come to fruition. The festival has grown from a rolling program called Our Linen Stories. We hope to tour to Vier in Holland in 2022 and to Philadelphia and Montreal in 2023, and then bring it back to Scotland in 2024. And in the meantime, I'd like to chat to you about the Flax Futures project, which I'm hoping to develop some support for in those 3 years. We've touched on them, the educational projects. So we're looking for demonstrator schools in Fife to take forward some educational projects, and we're linking with Dundee and St Andrews University. In terms of the tourist, North Fife has the most beautiful set of little villages with a heritage in them, and a cycle ride around the North Fife villages is entirely possible. So we're going to plot that in addition to our linen routes through heritage towns, which have been part of this year's festival. I think I have to mention also a wonderful initiative, the Silverburn Parkland and Flax Mill project, which will come to fruition in 2026. It's currently a derelict, rather handsome brick building from the 1850s on the Fife coastal route, absolutely beautiful part of Scotland. And I want to say that that is going to be our focus in our third festival in 2027. And I'll just leave you with the news that we've established a working group for Fibershed East Scotland. And I'm very excited that we have two folk here today. We have Susie Redmond, who's in Burntisland in the south of Fife, and we have Erica up in Newborough in the north of Fife. And our working group hopes to develop a network. And if it can be anything as wonderful as Fibrevolution, we'll be very excited. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for everyone contributing today. I've learned an awful lot, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be editing a little video and presenting that on our YouTube channel, Journeys in Design. And as I say, we'll email everyone with the key contacts from all our contributors. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. And I really hope that by the time of our next festival, we'll all be able to gather in person on the ground in Fife. So thank you very much for coming. And I'd say safe home, but we're all kind of at home already, aren't we? Thanks very much.